You're on a channel dedicated to sci-fi horror, creepy, mysterious, and thrilling stories. Today, we have a book from horrorstories.app, a platform filled with terrifying and awesome sci-fi tales. Check out the link in the description. There's plenty to read and listen to. Now get comfortable. Here's a story that won't let you sleep.
The Gideon hummed faintly, its systems laboring to keep the air breathable and the temperature steady. Dr. Elena Vasquez sat on the edge of her bunk, the glow of her data tablet casting sharp shadows across her face. Her fingers moved mechanically over the screen, but her mind was trapped in the image of that fused figure. Half human, half spire, a grotesque testament to something she couldn't yet name. Its hollow, inhuman eyes lingered in her thoughts, making her stomach churn. She swiped through the chaotic data, searching desperately for meaning, but the patterns remained maddeningly elusive. She paused, rubbing her temples and leaning back against the cold wall. The data didn't just represent the Hive, it felt like it was mocking her, shifting just enough to avoid interpretation. Her mind flitted to the spire's whispering hum, vibrating in her bones even hours later. The entire planet felt like a labyrinth designed to unravel them. Outside her small room, tension simmered, palpable through the thin walls. She could hear Jenna's uneven pacing, the click and hiss of her mechanical arm twitching rhythmically. It was a sound she'd never noticed before, but now it grated against her nerves, like the Hive had infected even that. Elena exhaled slowly, trying to suppress her growing unease. The Hive, the spire. It was too much. The haunting question wasn't just what it wanted, but whether they had any chance of stopping it. A sharp knock shattered her thoughts. She jolted, the tablet slipping from her hands. Before she could respond, Captain Aaron Malik stepped into the room, his imposing frame filling the doorway. His expression was grim, his jaw tight, and his movements deliberate as though bracing himself for what he was about to say. "Elena," he began, his voice low and steady. "We need to talk." She set the tablet aside and stood, her shoulders squaring instinctively as she faced him. "Is it Jenna? Her arm hasn't stopped reacting since the spire. It's not just her arm," Malik interrupted. His gaze was unflinching, but there was a shadow of doubt in his eyes that set her nerves on edge. "Tom spotted something out on the plains during his patrol. Says it looked like someone walking, someone who looked like him." Elena's breath hitched. "A hybrid?" she whispered. Malik nodded, his lips pressing into a thin line. "That's my guess. He's shaken, and frankly, I don't blame him. We've been here less than 24 hours, and this planet's already twisting itself into our heads, or worse." A cold dread seeped into Elena's chest. "If it's mimicking us already, the Hive's learning curve is far steeper than I feared." "That's not all." Malik's voice dropped further, barely above a murmur. Jenna swore she saw her reflection move on its own in the viewport. She says it didn't follow her. She's convinced it's studying her. Elena's jaw tightened. "That's not just paranoia," she said sharply. "It's calculated. It's trying to destabilize us." "I need to know if we're compromised," Malik said, his measured tone slipping for just a moment, betraying a flicker of fear. "If this thing has already gotten to us." Elena didn't respond immediately. Her gaze drifted back to the data on her tablet. Disjointed numbers and readings offering no reassurance. The memory of the figure embedded in the spire, its warped features a mockery of humanity, flashed in her mind. "We need to be vigilant," she said finally. "If the Hive can replicate us, it'll use that against us. We can't let it fracture the team." Malik's eyes narrowed. "Then keep watch over Neil. He's been erratic, distracted. When Tom told him about the hybrid, he barely reacted, just shrugged it off. Elena's lips thinned. Neil Hargrove had always been a wild card, his obsessive curiosity bordering on reckless. If anyone on this mission was vulnerable to the Hive's influence, it was him. "I'll talk to him," she said, though she doubted it would help. Neil wasn't the type to heed warnings, especially when they interfered with his pursuit of discovery. "Do it soon," Malik said. He turned to leave but hesitated in the doorway. "One more thing," he added, his voice softer now. If it gets inside one of us, do you think we'd know?" Elena froze. "I don't know," she admitted finally, the words heavy in the air. "But if it's as intelligent as I think, we might not." Malik's jaw flexed as he absorbed her answer. He nodded once, then turned and walked away, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and the faint, oppressive hum of the ship. The clamor in the common area was rising as Elena approached. Jenna's sharp voice cut through the air, laced with panic. "They're watching us," she was saying. "They're learning from us." I saw it. My reflection didn't move with me. It was off, like it was alive. Elena stepped into the room to find Jenna pacing in tight circles, her mechanical arm jerking sporadically with sharp, twitching motions. Tom Carter stood nearby, his arms crossed, his usual easy demeanor replaced by a guarded unease. Neil Hargrove lingered in the corner, his posture deceptively casual, though his sharp eyes flicked between the others like a predator assessing prey. "Jenna, calm down," Tom said carefully, his voice low and steady. "We've all been under stress. Maybe, don't patronize me," Jenna snapped, spinning to face him. Her mechanical arm twitched violently, the motion almost serpentine. "I know what I saw." "Enough," Elena said firmly, stepping forward. The tension in the room shifted as all eyes turned to her. "We can't afford to turn on each other. That's exactly what the Hive wants." Jenna's wide, desperate eyes locked onto her. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "It's already inside. It's in the walls, in the air, in us." Elena met her gaze, steady but cautious. "We don't know that," she said evenly. "But if it's true, panicking won't help. We need to stay focused." "Focused on what?" Neil interjected, his tone laced with irritation. "Running back to the spire to poke around again? Or maybe waiting for another one of those things to crawl out of the ground and introduce itself?" Elena turned to him, her stare sharp. "Do you have a better idea?" Neil smirked faintly but didn't answer, his silence more cutting than any reply. Tom cleared his throat, his voice quiet but firm. "I saw something out there," he said. "It wasn't just a shadow, it looked like me. Same build, same walk. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't natural." Elena's mind raced. If the Hive could mimic them so precisely, it was only a matter of time before it tried to infiltrate them outright. She straightened, her voice steady but urgent. "Then we need to act fast. The longer we stay here, the more it learns. We need to figure out how it's replicating us and stop it before it gets stronger." "And how exactly are we supposed to do that?" Neil asked, his tone venomous. Elena didn't have an answer. Not yet. That night, the whispers returned. Elena lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling as the faint, distorted voices seeped through the ship's walls. They were disjointed, fragmented, but there was something disturbingly familiar about them. She thought she heard her own voice among them, low and strained, speaking words she didn't recognize. She sat up abruptly, her heart pounding. The ship felt smaller, its walls pressing in. She grabbed her tablet and stood, intending to check the readings again, but she froze. A faint sound, like footsteps, echoed in the corridor outside. Elena moved toward the door, her pulse racing. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped just outside. Her hand hovered over the control panel. She pressed it, and the door slid open. The corridor was empty. Exhaling shakily, she turned to step back into her room, and froze. At the end of the hallway stood a figure. Its silhouette was unmistakable. It was her, or rather, something that looked like her. Its stance was wrong, too stiff, too deliberate, and its head tilted slightly, observing her. The dim light from the ship glinted off its blank, unseeing eyes. "Elena?" Malik's voice cut through from behind her. She turned sharply to see him approaching, his expression tense. When she turned back, the figure was gone. "What is it?" Malik asked, his voice low. Elena shook her head, her hands trembling. "It's here," she whispered. "It's already here." The attack came just before dawn. Jenna's scream tore through the ship, sharp and primal. Elena and Malik bolted toward the common area to find Jenna backed against the wall, her mechanical arm raised defensively. Before her stood a warped doppelganger, a grotesque mimicry of Jenna, its features twisted and incomplete, its movements jerky and wrong. Tom burst into the room, his weapon drawn, and fired without hesitation. The hybrid screeched, its voice sharp and piercing, before collapsing into a heap of writhing limbs. But the damage was done. The crew stood frozen, staring at the thing on the floor, a reflection of Jenna, horrifyingly distorted. "This is what it does," Elena said quietly, her voice trembling. "It's not just copying us, it's replacing us." Malik's jaw tightened, that we don't give it the chance. But as Elena glanced at the others, she saw the seeds of doubt taking root. The Hive's true weapon wasn't its hybrids. It was their fear, their mistrust of each other. And it was winning.
The horror doesn't end on this page. Subscribe to turn the next terrifying chapter